Shut up and sit down.
All right, Summa, I'd like to welcome you to a very special episode. I've invited Heather, one of my producers, to join us today to help us walk through a conversation about reverse engineering your paycheck. Heather began as a telemarketer in the agency 5 years ago, worked her way up through process management, got her insurance license for both property casualty as well as life and health, became a sub-producer working under an established agent, and then ultimately a producer. And she's been producing on her own for the last 3 or 4 years, doing an absolutely phenomenal job. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a while. But I'd like to talk with you today on the subject of reverse engineering your paycheck. Really, it is the reason that we're here. And how do we get paid? So, Heather, thank you for joining us today. I have a couple of questions for you just by way of introduction. First of all, when you first started in the business, what was a comfortable number for you? If I said, hey, where are you comfortable as far as the way that you're paid, what would that production number have been?
When I first started, anything that I wrote would make me comfortable.
That's a fair answer. All right.
But one of my first goals was about $30,000.
30,000, okay. And that puts you in a level where you're not comfortable, but you're a single mom, and it was a great place for you to start.
Right.
Fantastic. How long did it take you once we turned you loose? You'd gone through all the steps, worked under a sub, and became a producer on your own. How long did it take you to hit that 30,000 in sales?
I would say it was about 5 to 6 months.
I think you actually were a little quicker than that on that number. Something more important to me than the amount of production is really your close rate. What would you think you were closing at when you those first couple of months in the business?
Maybe 10%?
False, not even close. More like 2 to 3% in those first several months. Now, in reality, within 5 to 6 months, you were closing at 10%, and that really was kind of our goal for you. Answer this for me. What are you producing today by way of premium? And again, it's the least important thing to me. It's the most important thing to you. So it's a question I want to ask, and I want them to hear.
50 to 70,000 a month.
So I would say you've, over the last 18 months, probably averaged about 70,000 a month. Now, I'm not sure how that translates out there in the states where I'm talking with people today, but in Michigan, where we are, you are a rock star. You're really doing a good job. But you're not alone in the office. Others are producing at that same level. Right. Isn't that true? Okay.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about this reverse engineering thing just a little bit. If I were to give our Summa audience 2 assumptions, the first is, on average, you write about $1,000 per item. Would that be a pretty true statement?
Yes.
Up a little, down a little each month. But on average, we're going to stick with that number.
That is definitely the average.
Okay, and at some point, you did hit that 10% close rate. So let's stick with those 2 assumptions for the purpose of this illustration and keeping the math simple. If you told me that you wanted to write 30,000 in production in a month, how many items do you have to write to pop that 30 grand?
30.
30 items, perfect. If I were to remind you that you said that 10% was a good rate for you, and this is where people get lost. This is the disconnect, because we don't think in reverse. What gets us to those 30 items which get us to that 30,000 premium? Why is that important? Because it's so easy for you to get discouraged halfway through a month and you got 5 grand on the books. Well, your goal's 30,000. But if I can show you that if you follow a process and focus on a different number that gets you to that 30,000 and keeps you happy along the way, in other words, you don't go home and,
cry every night.
Cry or kick the cat at night, or, when you get home. Would that interest you? And I know that it would for all of us. So let's get back to this point. 30 items at a 10% close rate. How many quotes do you have to do to hit those 30 items?
300.
300 quotes. So would you keep track at your desk as to how many quotes you had on the books each day or each month?
Yes, I keep tally marks.
All right, let me ask you a more important question. At 300 quotes a day, if that's your focus, can that number get a little discouraging?
Oh, yeah.
So what really is the only thing you can control about your day? And this is the challenge, and this is what reverse engineering your paycheck does in your mind, which is the battle we all fight. If we were to take 23 work days in a month, we take that 300 number and divide it by the 23, we now have 13.6 quality contacts a day. Can you manage that number?
Yes.
300 quotes in a month can be unmanageable. 30 items in a month can be unmanageable. But 13.6 is something that you can manage.
Yes.
All right. Are there days that you didn't hit that number?
Yes.
Okay, why? Because you were binding policies.
Right. Okay.
The challenge is keeping that 13.6 flow consistent. Now, I've got another question for you, and you're going to help them because some of them are scratching their heads right now. I know that they are. They're thinking 300 quotes in a month. I can do more than 300 quotes in a month. Can you do more than 300 quotes in a month?
Possibly, but
You can, and you have. It isn't really about the number of quotes in a month as opposed to the number of quality contacts
right.
in a day. And in our next episode, we'll talk about what gets us to that 13.6 number, because I know that's a question that a lot of you have as well. But I've got Heather. She's going to continue to help us with this. So Heather, the disconnect comes at the 300 quote, dividing it into the 23 days, 13.6 quality contacts a day. Can you write more than 300 quotes in a month? You can, but your quality of life goes down.
Right.
And you hate your job.
Your conversations aren't
That's
quality if you're
perfect.
doing more than 300 quotes.
Perfect. So it isn't about getting through more volume, it's about getting through the volume with more quality.
Right, exactly.
That is a great answer. All right, so we're getting through these quotes with a higher quality. You're committing to the fact that you're not going to do more than 300 quotes in a month, whether you do that consciously or subconsciously, irrelevant. It's just something in the back of your mind. Well, then my obvious question to you is, how did you ever get to 45,000? And by the way, back up. When did you get to 45,000? How long did it take you to move from 30,000 a month in premium to 45,000 a month in premium?
I would say a year.
I would say half a year, because I really think you got there more quickly than that. Well, how did you get there? And I know some of you are tempted to say what most people say, and you're going to think, well, obviously she changed the equation. She's doing more quotes, and for her to hit that number now, that means she has to do 450 quotes in a month. I'm not saying she can't do it. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying you shouldn't do it. What was the key? How did you get to 45,000? What is the only thing in that equation that can change? And I'm suggesting it's not the $1,000 per item, because that's pretty much standard in our region. What is the only thing that changed that got you to 45,000 a month in premium without lifting a finger to write or to quote one more person?
It was definitely my connection. At first, I was too nervous to even call anyone or pick up the phone. I became more personable with prospects and began to connect with them.
Great answer.
My close rate increased.
That's the answer I was looking for. You can tell we haven't rehearsed. I mean, that's the whole point of this. We're trying to be natural with you. Your close rate moved from 10% incrementally up to 15%. Mm-hmm. And so when you hit 45,000, you're at 15% as a close. Now, in our state, people who quote on price, product, and personality have an average close rate of 4.25%. But this is just an example of one of my producers, and there are many. And they're all over 15% as a close rate. How did you get to 60,000 a month in sales? Did you quote more? Did you change the equation there? No, your close rate went to 20%.
Just got better at what I was doing.
All right, that's a great answer. How do we get better at what we're doing? I tell you what, we're going to take a little break. I want to come back in just a moment, and we'll talk about how you got better. I'll ask you some questions. You can prep. on the connection and what got you to a better connection and building better rapport. I know this is helping our Summa audience. Summa, thank you. We'll see you in our next episode.